Morning smoke curled above the traders' cook fires like spirits rising, thin braids of gray unspooling across the pale sky. Nombula stood barefoot outside her hut, toes pressed into cool dust, as if the earth could steady the tremor in her chest. From the river path came a sound that was almost music and almost threat. Drums, but not theirs. The beat rolled strangely, 3 quick heartbeats, then a pause that felt like a held breath. Foreign rhythm. Not the village's easy circle, not the old songs that knew every footpath by name. "Don't stare," Matabisa said behind her, voice clipped as knotted rope. "Trade is a man's worry." Nombula did not move. The breeze brought hints of ash and goat fat, the iron tang of river mud, and a sweetness she could not place. Beneath all of it, her stomach tightened, as if something old inside her turned its head to listen. She remembered Zweide's words from years ago, offered to a girl with skinned knees. "When the world hums wrong, child, your bones will hear it first." Welcome to the Judge Stories. If you love gripping tales with shocking twists, you're in the right place. Please subscribe to help us grow, and tell us in the comments which country you're watching from. In the compound beyond their fence, children chased a rolling hoop, shrieking, their laughter skipping like stones. Women bent over calabashes and grinding stones, shoulders shining with sweat, bracelets clinking like light rain. Life went on with the stubbornness of grass, yet the new rhythm threaded through it all, stitching a pattern none had asked for. Matabisa brushed past, bracelets jangling brighter than usual. She had tied her headcloth tight, the ends tucked with the care of a woman going to a hearing, not a hearth. "Come inside," she said, too softly now. "There's work." Nombula followed, ducking beneath the lintel. Their hut kept the sun kindly, cool clay walls, reed mats, the smoke hole dark as a pupil. Dried herbs hung in braids from the rafters, wild rosemary, fever tea, bitter aloe. Matabisa moved with quick hands, unstacking pots, counting gourds, checking the calabash of salt with a frown too deep for an ordinary day. "Are we expecting guests?" Nombula asked. "Perhaps," Matabisa said, then changed it with a smile that showed a little too many teeth. "Or perhaps I am tired of thin soup." Nombula raised a brow. Goat meat did not walk into their pot without reason. Still, she fetched kindling, coaxed flame against the stubborn wood, and watched as fat hissed and sang. The room filled with a richness that made her throat ache. Lutho slipped in on quiet feet, eyes bright, fingers already reaching for the promise of stew. "Wash," Nombula said, tapping the bowl. He obeyed, splashing, then grinning with the shy pride of a boy who remembered before he was told. The drums shifted again, closer now, then fainter, as if the river itself could not decide whether to carry them in or away. Nombula moved to the doorway. On the far slope beyond the gardens, smoke columns tilted, then straightened, as if listening too. A hawk circled once, a tiny scissor in the high blue. "Close it," Matabisa snapped, sharper than a knife on stone. Nombula pulled the mat aside and sat. The stew bubbled. Lutho hummed, an off-key tune about a goat that outsmarted a jackal. Nombula smiled despite herself, then caught Matabisa watching her with an odd pity, the way one looks at someone who does not yet know their test. "What is it?" Nombula asked. Matabisa's mouth opened, paused, shut. "Eat," she said instead, and ladled the first bowl too full, as if abundance could quiet questions. "Today we taste something better." Nombula lifted the spoon. The meat was tender, the broth a dark comfort. But on her tongue it soured, not from spice, but from knowledge she did not yet have words for. Outside, the wind stumbled and caught itself. Somewhere beyond the cattle pens, a jackal barked once and swallowed the rest of its voice. Nombula felt fate moving, small, deliberate, like a lizard testing the sun-warm wall. "After we eat," Matabisa said, too bright, "we will sort herbs. Then, perhaps, we will prepare for market." Nombula looked up. "It isn't market day." Matabisa's bracelets chimed. "Some buyers don't wait for drums," she said. Nombula held her gaze. For a long heartbeat, something passed between them. Love, debt, in a door neither wanted to name. Then Lutho giggled at a bubble bursting in the pot, and the moment folded itself away like a leaf closing tonight. Anambula picked up her spoon. She swallowed anyway, and far off the river kept beating its strange, patient heart. The stew bubbled thicker than it had in months. Goat, not roots. The scent filled their small hut with a heaviness that clung to the rafters, rich enough to make even the air taste of promise. Matabisa leaned over the pot, humming under her breath. The tune was unfamiliar, slow, almost mournful, and it sent a ripple through Nambula's stomach that no hunger could explain. When she turned, Matabisa's face caught the firelight strangely. Shadows crossed her cheeks like bars. "Fetch more water," she said, voice too even. Nambula obeyed, stepping outside. The evening had dropped its heat. The sky glowed bruised orange, fading into indigo. From beyond the fields, drums pulsed, closer now, slower. The sound made her skin prickle. It wasn't their rhythm. It belonged to travelers who traded salt, ivory, and other things not spoken of. She returned to find the bowls already laid, 3 of them filled to the brim. Lutho sat cross-legged, eyes wide with delight. His laughter fluttered like a bird between them. "Look, sister," he said, dipping his fingers. "Meat! Real meat!" Matabisa smiled, her bracelets chiming. "Eat, child," she said, filling Nambula's bowl again though it was already full. "You too, Nambula, tonight we eat well." Nambula hesitated. "Why tonight?" Matabisa paused, spoon midair. Then she said lightly, "New beginnings." The words slipped into the room like smoke, curling into corners, sticking to the walls. Nambula took a bite, but the taste turned bitter before she could swallow. She forced it down anyway, watching her mother stir the pot as if trying to drown thought itself. Outside, a jackal howled once, long, mournful, fading into silence. Lutho laughed nervously. "Maybe he smells the goat." Nambula smiled weakly, but her heart beat faster. "Or maybe he warns us," she whispered, half to herself. "Don't fill his head with nonsense," Matabisa snapped too quickly. "Jackals are thieves, not prophets." Lutho's grin faltered. He looked between them, sensing a grown-up tension he couldn't name. Nambula reached over and brushed his curls. "Eat, little one. There's enough tonight." When they finished, Matabisa gathered the bowls and poured the leftovers into a gourd. "For the morning," she said. Her hands trembled, just enough to clink metal against clay. Nambula watched her closely. Her mother's movements were tidy, practiced, but her eyes darted to the doorway again and again, as though waiting for something or someone. "Mama," Nambula said softly, "are we expecting visitors?" Matabisa froze, then forced a laugh that rang hollow. "Visitors? Only blessings." She turned to hang the ladle, but her shoulders sagged. For the first time, Nambula saw how thin her arms had become, how the bracelets hung loose. There was tiredness there, not the kind born of work, but of worry too long carried. Nambula rose and touched her mother's arm. "If something troubles you, tell me." Matabisa's smile returned, brittle and bright. "You are a child," she said, brushing the hand away. "Sleep. Tomorrow we go to market early." "But," "No buts." Her tone cut clean. "The gods favor those who rise before the sun." Nambula looked at her little brother, already dozing by the fire, belly round from rare fullness. The warmth of the stew couldn't quiet the chill that had settled in her chest. She lay on her mat, but did not sleep. The night pressed close, heavy with the smell of goat fat and wood smoke. Through the smoke hole, she could see the stars trembling like tiny watchfires. Somewhere far off, water whispered against stones. When she finally drifted, it wasn't into rest, but into a half-dream of footsteps on wet earth and voices whispering through reeds. And beneath them all, the foreign drum, patient and low, keeping time for something that was coming. Before dawn, Makulu's Wade woke with a cry lodged in his throat. His mat was drenched, the ash on his cheeks streaked into gray rivers of sweat. The hut smelled of rain and fear. In the dream, he had seen it again, a golden jackal limping through fire, its eyes reflecting both mercy and betrayal. When it turned to look at him, its mouth opened and spoke his late daughter's name, Mathabisa. He sat up slowly, joints aching, and whispered a prayer that wove the living to the dead. Ancestors, if your message burns, let me bear it. Outside, the roosters had not yet crowed. The horizon still wore a bruise of night. At the river, Numbula bent over the water, scooping ripples into her calabash. The air was crisp, her breath visible. She watched fish scatter under the reflection of her face. Young, solemn, marked by something she couldn't name. A frog croaked once, a sharp warning. Then came the soft crunch of feet on sand. "Makulu," she said, not turning. He stood behind her, wrapped in a goatskin cloak. "Your mother speaks," he rasped, "through flame and beast." Numbula blinked, setting the calabash down carefully. "But I didn't dream." He stepped closer, resting a trembling hand on her crown. "Some truths don't wait for dreams, they come walking." The river shimmered faintly, a thin mist rising like ghosts stretching before work. He knelt beside her and scooped a handful of mud, dark and cold, smearing a line of it across her wrist. "This mark will listen for you. When it warms, danger is near." Numbula frowned but didn't pull away. "You think something's coming?" "I know it." His voice was like stone breaking. "When drums speak a new tongue, the world renames itself." She thought of the strange rhythm that had haunted the air since yesterday. "You heard them too?" He nodded. "Foreign drums, traders who sell more than wares. Your mother should keep you close." Numbula hesitated. "She said we go to market today." Zweide's eyes clouded. Today is not market day. Her heart skipped. She wanted to laugh it off, but his stare rooted her. He drew a small pouch from his cloak and pressed it into her palm. Inside, ash and salt. If you must choose between road and river, choose neither. Wait for wind. It carries answers faster than feet. Numbula opened her mouth to ask, but a rustle in the reeds made her spin. Only a bird took flight, but her pulse raced all the same. By the time she turned back, Zweide had risen, already walking toward the village. His voice drifted behind him like smoke. "Tell her I saw the jackal limping again, and this time, it bleeds." Numbula stood there long after he vanished, the pouch warm against her skin. The sun began to climb, brushing gold across the hills. For a moment, she could almost believe it was any other morning. Children shouting, cows lowing, a woman calling for her lost gourd. But under it all pulsed that alien rhythm, slow and deliberate, like footsteps on hollow wood. She lifted her calabash and started back. Mathabisa was already outside, headcloth tight, eyes too bright. "Hurry," she said. "We leave for market." Numbula frowned. "Makulu says, I know what old men say." Mathabisa's tone sliced the air. "Dreams don't feed us. Coins do." Numbula wanted to protest, to tell her about the pouch, about the jackal and the ash. But Lutho ran up, clutching a reed doll, his smile soft as dawn. "Sister, I'll help carry." She looked at him, then at her mother. The words died in her throat. Zweide's warning still echoed in her mind. When drums speak a new tongue, the world renames itself. And as they stepped beyond the gate, Numbula felt the mark on her wrist grow warm. The path twisted away from the known trails, a thin ribbon cutting through thorn and whispering grass. The morning sun glowed weakly, veiled by low clouds that made the world feel smaller. Numbula adjusted the basket on her head and glanced around. The way looked wrong, the ground too damp, the trees unfamiliar, their roots clutching at the earth like hands. "Mama," she said quietly, "this isn't the way to Makaya Market." Mathabisa didn't answer. Her stride was sharp, determined. The coins at her waist jingled softly, a sound that should have meant fortune, but today it felt like a funeral bell. "Mama," Numbula pressed again, "keep walking." The tone was brittle, not angry, afraid. Behind them, the morning sounds of the village had long faded. Only the rustle of wind through reeds and the distant rush of the river followed. The closer they came, the heavier the air felt. Numbula's wrist, the one Zweed had marked with ash and salt, began to tingle, heat blooming like a hidden ember. Her pace faltered. "Something's wrong," she whispered. Matabisa finally stopped and turned. Her face was pale beneath the scarf, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Listen to me, child. Whatever happens, do not fight." "What do you mean?" Nomvula's voice broke slightly. But before Matabisa could answer, the reeds ahead parted. 3 men stepped out. One wore foreign boots, scuffed and dusted white. Another had beads of bone strung across his chest and fingers that twitched like a man used to holding whips. The third was lean and silent, his expression unreadable. A canoe waited behind them, tethered to the muddy shore. Nomvula froze. "Who are they?" Matabisa's voice came soft, cracked. "The ones who trade in lives and save those they love." Nomvula blinked. The words did not fit together. Her stomach twisted. "No, no, Mama, you can't mean—" Matabisa reached out, fingers trembling as they brushed her daughter's cheek. "You'll thank me one day," she whispered. "Your life buys my son's freedom." The world tilted. Nomvula stumbled back. "You promised Baba to protect me." "I promised my blood a future." Matabisa's face hardened, the softness gone. "They took Lutho for debt. This is the price." Nomvula's mouth went dry. "Lutho, you—" But her words caught as one of the men stepped forward and bound her wrists with rough rope. She didn't scream. The sound lodged somewhere deep behind her ribs, frozen with disbelief. The river glinted just beyond, a slick ribbon of light that used to mean childhood swims and songs about fish and rain. Now it waited, indifferent. "Mama, please," Nomvula said at last. Matabisa turned away. "Tell the river you were loved." Nomvula's heart cracked like pottery in fire. The men pushed her toward the canoe. Her feet stumbled through wet mud, each step pulling her further from the world she knew. The rope cut her skin. The smell of riverweed filled her lungs. Lutho's face flashed before her, his gap-toothed smile, his reed doll, his laughter echoing across mornings like sunlight. She wanted to hate her mother. She wanted to scream until the sky shattered. But she couldn't. Because she saw it then, the trembling in Matabisa's hands, the faint tremor of someone who'd already lost everything and was about to lose her soul too. As the canoe shoved off, Nomvula met her mother's eyes one last time. There was no victory there, only ruin. The oar struck water. Ripples spread outward like whispers, reaching the reeds, the trees, and the world that had turned its face away. Nomvula closed her eyes. The river swallowed their reflection. And somewhere far off a jackal cried, not in hunger, but mourning. The river carried them in silence. Its surface shimmered with false calm, gold where the sun touched, dark where shadows fell. Nomvula sat hunched between 2 strangers, wrists raw from the rope, feet damp from the water pooling at the canoe's bottom. Her breath came shallow, her heart an unending drum. The man who rowed had eyes like stone, no cruelty, no mercy. Another sat at the bow, sharpening a blade against the wood, the sound grating like teeth on bone. The third, the one in foreign boots, hummed a tune that did not belong to any land she knew. Nomvula turned her head slightly. Along the bank, the village roofs had shrunk into memory. Smoke trailed thin and distant above the trees. She searched for one face, for her mother, but Matabisa was already gone, swallowed by the path in her choice. Beside her, a young man shifted. He was different, his skin lighter, his clothes cleaner, no rope binding his wrists. His hair was tied neatly, and his hands, restless but uncalloused, tapped against his knees. He caught her glance and looked away quickly, guilt flickering across his features. Their eyes met again when the blade sharpener spat into the river and muttered, "Tulani, tell your father she's worth more than the others." Nomvula stiffened. The slaver's son. Thulani flinched at the name, his jaw tightening. He turned his gaze to the river, pretending he hadn't heard. Nomvula looked away too, swallowing her fury. Pity was a luxury she could not afford. "In kind," The boat cut through reeds, their tips brushing her arms like fingers trying to hold her back. In the distance, a boy's voice called faintly, thin, desperate, breaking the stillness. Nombula! Her head snapped up. On the far bank stood Lutho, barefoot, hair wild, eyes wide with terror. He ran into the shallows, arms reaching. Lutho! She screamed, struggling against the rope. The man with the blade grabbed her shoulder, shoving her down. Quiet! She kicked, twisted, but the oar came down, striking her ribs. Pain exploded through her chest. Still, she lifted her head enough to see Mathabisa appear behind Lutho, dragging him back, hissing words she couldn't hear. Nomvula's voice tore from her throat. Lutho! The boy's wail echoed over the water. One word, one plea, before Mathabisa clamped her hand over his mouth and pulled him toward the trees. The oar struck again. The canoe lurched forward into deeper current. The boy's cry became wind, then nothing. Nombula lay still, the world spinning. She stared at the sky until her tears blurred it into silver. The taste of blood mixed with salt on her tongue. She thought of Makulu's weed's warning. When drums speak a new tongue, the world renames itself. He had been right. She was no longer Nomvula the daughter, Nomvula the sister. She was becoming something else, something the river would name in time. The foreign rhythm rose again, faint but certain, carried by the current. Drums, traders, chains. Nomvula sat upright, her chest aching, and whispered to the water, If I live, I will rise again, with fire in my hands. Her voice trembled, but the vow did not. The river shimmered, catching her reflection, blurred, chained, unfamiliar. Around her, no one spoke. The men rode in silence, their faces carved from distance. One woman behind her wept into her lap. Another prayed under her breath. Nombula did neither. She swallowed her sorrow like dry bark, tasting bitterness, swallowing it again until it turned to resolve. The river carried her onward, away from home, away from the sound of her brother's cry, and toward a horizon that promised both darkness and reckoning. The slaver ship creaked like an old beast in pain. Every gust of wind made its ribs groan. The smell below deck was thick, sweat, salt, fear, and rotting wood, a stench that clung to the skin like guilt. Nombula crouched beside a girl burning with fever, her own wrists bruised and bleeding from iron cuffs. Around her, rows of captives lay slumped or whispering prayers in tongues the ocean swallowed whole. She tore a strip from her dress, dipped it into a bowl of muddy water, and pressed it to the child's brow. The girl's skin burned like fire. Nombula whispered softly, Stay. The sea only takes the ones who stop fighting. Footsteps echoed on the boards. Nombula froze. Thulani descended the narrow steps, a jug of water in hand. The lantern light painted his face in uneasy gold. Not cruel, not kind, just lost. He hesitated, looking at the rows of chained bodies, then at her. Here, he said quietly, setting the jug down. Nombula didn't look up. Why do you help her? She asked. Her voice was steady, not gratitude, challenge. He swallowed. Because no one else will. She wrung the cloth again. Because you can, she corrected. Choice is a privilege of the free. Thulani said nothing. The chain creaked as he shifted. I didn't choose this, he whispered finally. Nombula's eyes lifted, sharp, weary, defiant. Then choose differently. The words struck him harder than any storm could. He stood there a moment longer, as if wanting to answer, then turned and climbed back toward the light. His footsteps faded, but their echo stayed. Hours passed. The sea groaned beneath them. Above, men shouted orders, boots thudding, ropes whipping against wood. Nombula whispered her name under her breath. Nombula, daughter of Kwezi. Nombula, daughter of the land. She said it over and over, weaving it through her breath like a prayer. If she forgot her name, she would cease to exist. In the corner, an old woman began to hum, low, trembling, carrying a rhythm older than the ship, older than chains. Others joined, voices cracked but alive. The melody rose like smoke through the cracks in the boards. For a moment, the ship itself seemed to listen. Thulani paused above deck, hand on the rail. The wind cut cold against his face. Below, the humming drifted upward, the same name threading through it. Namvula. It echoed in his chest like guilt given a heartbeat. Night fell without stars. Clouds rolled heavy, thick with rain. The waves slapped the hull harder, angrier. The men shouted again, voices swallowed by wind. Namvula clung to the child beside her as water seeped through the cracks, first drops, then a stream. Someone screamed, "Storm!" Lightning tore the sky open, showing a world of white foam and chaos. The ship tilted, bodies slammed against wood. Chains rattled like thunder trapped in iron. "Hold her!" Namvula shouted, gripping the fevered child. But the girl slipped from her arms as the floor heaved. Namvula lunged, her fingers brushing air. Above, Thulani's voice cut through the noise. Hoarse, desperate, shouting orders she couldn't hear. He fought to steady the ropes, his face pale beneath the rain. Half boy, half ghost. A mast cracked like a snapped bone. The ship shuddered. The world turned sideways. Namvula's back hit the planks. Seawater crashed over her. Cold swallowed everything. The last thing she saw was Thulani's silhouette framed against lightning, one hand reaching toward the chaos, the other gripping the mast that was already breaking. The sea roared. The chains went slack. Namvula's breath burst in bubbles. Salt filled her lungs as darkness opened its mouth and took her whole. Still clutching her red thread, she sank, the vow, the pain, and the name falling with her, into the belly of the sea. Waves hissed along Makonda Bay as morning broke, their foam curling white against black sand. Gulls screamed overhead, circling the wreck that the sea had coughed up overnight. Pieces of wood bobbed among reeds. A torn sail, a broken oar, a single leather boot. From the tangle of seaweed and drift, a body moved. Thulani stumbled onto the shore, coughing salt and guilt. His clothes clung to him like a second skin. His hands shook as he wiped blood from his temple. All around him, there was no one left alive, only silence and ruin. Then near the water's edge, something shifted. He turned. A young woman lay half buried in reeds, skin pale beneath streaks of mud. Her braid, heavy with sand, glinted faintly, a red thread woven through it like a heartbeat. "Namvula," he whispered. He fell to his knees beside her. Her lips were blue, her breath shallow. For a moment, he hesitated. Then with trembling fingers, he reached into the pouch at his belt and drew out a beaded bracelet. Green, red, gold. It had belonged to his mother, a charm for safe passage across seas. He slipped it gently onto Namvula's wrist. "I cannot undo what we were," he murmured, voice breaking. "But may this bring you back." Then he vanished into the trees before the villagers arrived, leaving nothing behind but footprints, the bracelet, and a breath of redemption. Hours later, the tide rose again and washed against Namvula's legs. Her fingers twitched. The thread in her braid pulled tight, glowing faintly where the sun caught it. She gasped, coughing seawater, eyes snapping open. The first thing she saw was the sky, vast, unbroken, painfully bright. The second was the bracelet, warm against her skin. She sat up slowly, her head throbbed. The wreckage stretched for miles. She saw no faces, only emptiness. Then in the distance, a shape, a doll made of reeds, drifting between waves before vanishing under foam. Her heart cracked open. Lutho. She touched the bracelet again, closing her eyes. "If I live, I'll find you," she whispered, "even if the world breaks twice more." That night, she built a small fire near the dunes, feeding it bits of driftwood. She sat wrapped in silence, staring into the flames as the sea hummed behind her. In her half-sleep, the world returned, not as memory, but as dream. She saw Lutho again, barefoot, weeping, reaching for her through smoke. "Come back," he whispered. "Mama took me too." Namvula's heart seized. "No," she said in the dream, running toward him, but the ground turned to water. The more she ran, the farther he drifted. "Come back," he cried again. "You promised." The flames in the dream flared, turning gold then red, swallowing him whole. She woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. The bracelet pulsed with warmth, as if alive. She stared at it, trembling. The sea had spared her body, but the dream pierced deeper. She understood now. Matabisa's bargain had devoured them both. Nombula rose, the dawn wind tugging at her torn dress. Behind her, the horizon bled pink, gentle and cruel. She turned inland, every muscle aching, her feet sinking into wet sand. Each step was a prayer. For him, for myself, for the fire yet to come. She didn't look back. The waves erased her footprints as fast as she made them. But the vow, the thread, the bracelet, the name, burned unerasable. By the time the sun stood high, Nombula had vanished into the hills, the ocean whispering her name like a promise that would not die. Nombula walked barefoot for days, guided by hunger, memory, and the pulse of her vow. The road home wound through thorn and dust, across ridges where vultures wheeled lazy circles. Each night she slept curled beneath trees, her fire small and careful, her dreams stitched with the sound of breaking waves. When she finally saw the green line of Kwamthimbu's hills, her breath caught. Smoke rose from the village, not from ruin, but from cooking fires. The ordinary sight hurt more than the storm. She had changed. The world had not. Her clothes hung in tatters, stiff with salt. Her hair was knotted, her body thinner, marked by bruises the sun could not heal. Children stared as she passed, whispering. Dogs barked but did not chase. Some villagers turned away, muttering prayers for protection. A girl gone to the river and returned from the sea was a story few wanted walking among them. At the edge of the homestead, Makuluzwid sat beside a small fire, grinding herbs with slow, patient strokes. He did not look up as she approached. "The river spit you back," he said. Nombula fell to her knees. "I need him," she whispered. Zwide's hands did not stop moving. The pestle thudded softly. "Your brother?" he said, not asking. Her voice cracked. "They took him too. I saw him in a dream. He called to me." Finally, the old man lifted his gaze. His eyes were red around the edges, but steady. "Dreams are messengers," he said. "They come carrying what the heart already knows." Nombula clenched her fists. "Then tell me where to find him." Zwide's face softened. "Smoke curls on the horizon, too far for cooking fires. Raiders passed here days ago, took a woman and a boy." The ground seemed to tilt. "Lutho?" He nodded. "And the mother who sold you. The jackal now feels the teeth." Nombula stared into the distance where the faintest line of dark smoke still smudged the sky. The air carried no voice, but her bones heard him, Lutho's thin, frightened cry. Zwide reached into his satchel and pulled out a pouch of herbs. "For courage," he said. She took it, fingers shaking. "For Lutho," she replied. He looked at her for a long moment. "You walk a path lined with ghosts, child. Forgive none too quickly, and hate none too long. Both will chain you again." Nombula tied the pouch around her neck, the red thread brushing her cheek. "I am done with chains," she said. Thunder rumbled in the east. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and smoke together, cleansing and warning in the same breath. Zwide rose slowly. "The storm will follow you," he murmured, "but perhaps this time it will bow." Nombula turned to leave, her feet already coated in the dust of the road. Behind her, the old man's voice rose once more, softer now. "When you find him," he said, "remember, the river that took also gave. You carry both in your blood." She paused, half turning. "Then I'll return both," she said, "with fire in my hands." And she walked into the horizon where smoke met sky. By nightfall, her shadow stretched long behind her, and the world ahead pulsed with thunder. She did not flinch. The earth trembled faintly beneath her steps, as if recognizing something. The return of a promise, once swallowed by the river. She walked until her legs burned, until the stars came out. Somewhere beyond the next hill waited the people who had taken everything. And this time, Nambala was not the one to be traded. This time, she was the storm. By the river bend where she had once been taken, the air smelled of rain and rust. Nambala stood in the shadow of the trees, her fingers brushing the red thread it woven into her braid. The wind carried whispers, the murmur of men, the scrape of oars, the faint, hollow laughter of those who thought the night belonged to them. A figure emerged from the darkness, cloaked, hood drawn low, horse tethered behind him. Nambula's pulse jumped. "You," she said. Thulani stepped forward, mud on his boots, weariness etched into the lines beneath his eyes. He looked older, the softness gone, replaced by a quiet hunger for atonement. "I heard of a girl who defied chains," he said, voice hoarse. "She burned in the sea and still walked back." Nambula's gaze hardened. "And you, the slaver's son, who watched?" He nodded once. "I watched. I also left it behind." He unwrapped the bundle in his arms. Inside lay a stack of maps, coins, and folded parchment marked with names. "These are the raiders who took your brother. I've been tracking them since the storm." She stared at the bundle, suspicion and disbelief wrestling in her chest. "Why help me?" Thulani's voice cracked like wood under strain. "Because I'm tired of my father's ghosts. And because you looked at me that day as if I could still be human." Nambala said nothing. Forgiveness was a luxury she hadn't learned to afford. But vengeance required allies, and she could see the truth in his eyes. A man haunted enough to want redemption, even if it killed him. She nodded once. "Then we moved before dawn." They waited under the tree line, watching the river. Hours passed, filled only with the pulse of crickets and the soft creak of Thulani's horse shifting its weight. When the moon reached its fullest, faint torchlight appeared across the bend. 3 boats, men with cargo. One of them held something small. A child-sized silhouette, bound and slumped. Nambula's breath caught. "Lutho." Thulani touched her arm. "We'll trade. I've arranged it." He stepped into the clearing, his voice low but steady. "You have something I need," he called. "I bring payment." The raider chief, a broad-shouldered man with teeth filed sharp, laughed. "And what's that?" "Silver, spices, and ivory," Thulani replied, tossing a sack forward. It hit the ground with a dull jingle. The chief stooped, inspecting it with greedy eyes. "For the boy?" "Only the boy," Thulani said. Nambula stepped out of the shadows then, her figure lit by moonlight, the river reflecting her like a blade. The raiders murmured among themselves. Her face, lean and resolute, looked nothing like the girl once sold. The chief sneered. "And who's this? Another prize?" Nambula's voice cut through the air. "No, the one who chooses." The fire between them crackled. A breeze swept through, scattering embers that glowed like restless spirits. Thulani placed his hand on the hilt of a knife, but waited. Nambula's stare didn't waver. "Release the boy," she said. "You have your silver." The chief grinned, testing her resolve. "And if I refuse?" Nambula stepped closer until her shadow merged with the firelight. "Then you'll learn what happens when a river remembers." For a long moment, silence balanced between them. Then, with a grunt, the man gestured. One of his crew pushed Lutho forward, stumbling, thin and trembling. Thulani exhaled. Coins clinked again as he tossed another small pouch. The deal sealed itself in metal and greed. As they turned to leave, Nambula whispered, "If they follow, we end it here." Thulani nodded. The night held its breath. Behind them, the raiders began to argue over their spoils. One man raised his voice. Another reached for a blade. Within moments, chaos erupted among them, greed devouring itself. Nambula didn't look back. She only tightened her grip on Lutho's hand. The river that once stole her now murmured softly, carrying away the sound of dying men. Some ghosts, she thought, finally learned how to drown themselves. They waited by the river, same bend, same silence. Nambula held Lutho close, his small frame shaking in her arms. The boy's eyes were wide, too old for his age, as if the world had stolen his childhood and left only echoes. Behind them, Thulani paced, his face tight, his hands twitching with nerves he couldn't name. A lantern swung on the far shore, its flame trembling. A canoe glided out, cutting the reflection of the moon in half. 3 figures sat inside, a paddler, a chained woman, and the raider who held her leash. Nomvula's breath caught. Even through the dusk, she recognized the face. Matabisa. The sight hit her like cold rain. Her mother's scarf was torn, her wrists bruised, her eyes wild. Shame and rage battled there, neither winning. The trader called out, "Your bargain's done. The boy's free, but the woman stays unless you double the price." Thulani's hand went for his pouch, but Nomvula caught his wrist. "No!" Matabisa sank to her knees in the boat. "Please," she cried. "He's your brother. I saved him once." Nomvula's heart twisted. "You didn't save him," she said quietly. "You bartered my soul to buy his." The trader shrugged, amused. "Mercy costs silver." Nomvula stepped forward, her voice steady. "Keep your silver. Keep her." Matabisa's scream tore the air. "You cannot leave me. I did it for him. For us." Nomvula's face was calm, almost too still. "You did it for fear, and fear is a debt that never ends." The raider chuckled, gestured to his men, and pushed the canoe back into the current. As it drifted away, Matabisa's cries faded into the sound of paddles slicing water. Lutho clung to Nomvula's skirt, trembling. "We can't leave her," he whispered. Nomvula knelt, brushing his tears away with a gentleness that trembled at the edges. "She made her choice, little one. Now we make ours." Behind them, Thulani stood in silence, eyes lowered, the weight of mercy heavy in his chest. The river rolled on, indifferent. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in every breath. They walked back toward a Kwamthembu beneath a sky that bled gold into indigo. The earth was wet from a light rain, and the air smelled of ash and new grass, the scent of endings and beginnings woven together. When they reached the village gate, the elders waited in a crescent of silence. Old Makuluzwita leaned on his stick, eyes gleaming with both sorrow and pride. Nomvula stepped forward, Lutho beside her, Thulani just behind. "We returned," she said, voice firm, "not for pity, but for peace." Zwidi nodded slowly. "Peace comes when truth walks first." Thulani stepped beside her, removing his hood. "I followed her courage," he said. "If you will have me, I will stay and serve. I owe my life to her, and I owe this land a debt." The murmurs among the elders quieted. One old woman whispered, "A son of a slaver, serving the freed. Perhaps the gods do laugh." Nomvula met her gaze. "The gods restore, if we let them." Zwidi raised his hands. "Then let restoration begin." Nomvula turned to Thulani. "You cannot wash blood with water, but you can plant seeds where it once spilled. Stay and plant well." He bowed his head. "I will." Later, beneath the fig tree at the village's edge, Nomvula sat with Lutho. The night was soft, filled with crickets and the slow beat of a distant drum, one that finally sounded like home. "Bend your head," she said. She took the last piece of her red thread and wove it gently into his hair. "For memory. For truth." Lutho looked up, eyes shining. "Will it keep me safe?" She smiled faintly. "It will keep you rooted." A few steps away, Thulani watched in silence, fingers brushing the bracelet he had once placed on her wrist. In his eyes lived both regret and hope. The first rays of dawn broke over the hills. Drums echoed again. No war, no warning, just welcome. Nomvula rose barefoot, Lutho's hand in hers. Thulani standing quietly at her back. She did not tell a tale of sorrow. She told one of return, of a girl taken, a boy saved, and a love that chose justice. And when the sun climbed fully, Kwamthembu sang her name.